Okay everyone, hello. We're here in the glass blowing studio of Thomas Petit. Huge thank you, Thomas, for taking the time to spend with us today and talk about your work.
So here we are. This is called gathering, getting the glass out onto the blow pipe. So this is a wooden block made of cherry wood. I wasn't very good at school, academically. I got into pottery and thought I was going to be the next Bernard Leach. But my pottery teacher said that I was the jack of all trades, which I thought meant a little bit good at all the various parts of pottery, but actually meant not that great at all the different bits of pottery. It's nice to have the encouragement of your teachers.
Isn't it just?
So I decided, my mother said, well, let's try some other genres of art. So I tried a bit of sculpture, I tried some printing, which I really enjoyed, but then found out I needed A levels in science and maths for that, so that didn't happen, fun enough. So then I tried various things, and then finally, when they were running out of options, they said, is there anything you fancy doing? And I said, well, when I was 10, we went on holiday to Devon. We went to Dartington Crystal and watched this big factory make glass. Now, there's a smaller version of that. I don't want to work in a factory, but there's a smaller kind of arty version of that, which I didn't think there was, but then I would be interested in that. And my mum was very resourceful and went to the Crafts Council and found out about courses, weekend courses in glass blowing, and found this chap down in a place called Presanbeeble in Cornwall, and he did weekend courses, so I went off down to Cornwall. And as soon as I tried it, pottery schmottery, I just fell in love with this. It's much more instant, warmer. All I'm doing is centering it. Exactly the same as pottery on a wheel. So all the colours are on here. So I lay out my colours in exactly the way I'm going to use them. So the trails, as I called them earlier on, they're applications of another bit of glass that are rolled in various colours. So that will be the first trail, and then that will be the second trail, and then the third trail is these, which has this on it as well. Get that off. So, and then there's a base colour as well, which is, this is a green colour, and I have to use 3 layers of it because it's to get a dense enough colour. Otherwise it looks really quite a thin, pale kind of colour. So this is the green I was talking about. And I'm supporting the pipe as I'm rolling it. So you're just going to get as much cover as possible. And then you're in here and you melt it onto the surface. So all the colours are glass, so all you're doing is you're adding glass to glass. So then it goes into something called a ridge mould. This creates the lines in the colour. So it actually comes out a bit like looking like a lemon squeezer, if that makes sense. Which it will make sense once I've jammed it in. So this goes in here. But you're not going to keep those ridges, you're heating it and then rolling it on a metal table so that it flattens out, but you retain the lines. And then I'll twist it slightly so that the lines don't stay straight up and down, but they go at an angle. You have to keep turning this the whole time, otherwise it droops. This is called a marver, so it's just a metal table, but I use it a lot. A lot of glass makers don't use it at all, but
that's putting the curve into the stripes, isn't it?
it's just, for me, I just find it easy. It cools things down, it shapes things. And if I'm trying to twist the stripes up a bit, so it's a bit like the moonwalker, I'm sort of turning but going the wrong direction. Then I'm going to do is just put the first bubble in it. So I blow into it, put my thumb on the end of it, and the air heats up the heat heats up the air, whatever, and you get a bubble. Talking rubbish. That's the theory. So that's just the first, as you can see, the first bubble can be a bit tricky. Right, so then we cool it down a certain amount and then go back in the furnace and get another layer over the top. I went on to a foundation course, not glass, general arts. Got on a degree course in Sunderland. Didn't really gel with it because it wasn't something I wanted to do. I was much more a hands-on person than I failed art, so I was, this was 3D glass and design. So I took a year out. I went to do the course I'd always wanted to do before I was forced into doing a degree, which was in Brierley Hill, which was part of the factory system around Dudley and Brierley Hill and Stourbridge and all those places. It was run by people who had like 30, 40 years in the trade. Admittedly a different kind of angle to where I wanted to go, but had all the skills of the glass blowing and technical and cutting and all that sort of thing. You get nothing at the end of it apart from a piece of paper, but you had hands-on experience. You were learning of people who 30 years of making all sorts of crazy things. So I saw a job advertised in Craft magazine in New Zealand and thought, fantastic. And so I went to New Zealand for, it's meant to be a 3-month trial. The flight out was a bit of a nightmare, and I just didn't want to go back. I couldn't face that flight back. And I actually stayed 3 years. And did really well and sold through a lot. I was doing much better than I'd ever done in the UK, and was basically ended up managing the studio I'd gone out to work at. Nice. So this is a bit like Kevlar-ish. Inside it is newspaper, and this works really well on this. If you just use paper, you can end up sticking paper all over the surface, and you get this horrible sort of residue. The only thing with this is you have to have it very wet because it sticks as well, and you'll end up with a strange texture on it, which is not what you want. And this is just like removals paper, packaging paper. We used to use yellow pages, but those are gone. And so we've had to move on to something else, and this seems to be better than newspaper. Newspaper seems to fall apart, so this lasts longer. And you also have to worry about print and stuff. The problems with the newer yellow pages had sort of plastic in the paper to make sure it didn't tear. So I mean, it worked brilliantly as yellow pages, but not so much for us. So these are the trails. So these are the bands of colour that go around the piece. So that's the blowing iron. This is a bit iron for getting bits. There's also a punty iron, but we'll come to that. Gather. So all of the trails have this white as a background. lot of kids say it looks like marshmallow at this point. Doesn't taste like marshmallow though. So you have two sides of a green. The reason I don't put the two colours on straight away is because when it gets hot I can't tell which one's which, so you can't put more on. Everything looks orange. So then it goes into a little ridge mould, just get some lines in it. And then we get the main body. This is where you need to be ambidextrous. I'm turning the pipes in the opposite direction to each other, because if you turn in the same direction, there's a very good chance you'll stick together. So then you trail the colour on. You're turning the yarn as you're putting it on so that the colour spirals as it goes on. Can't really see what it's going to look like until you flatten it. So you heat it and roll it on the marble on the metal table, and then have to do that again until it's totally flat into the surface. Otherwise, if you have any kind of indentations, when you get the next trail, which slightly overlaps it, you can get, if you have indentations, you get bubbles. You sometimes get bubbles anyway, but we're trying to avoid as many bubbles as possible. Some people like the bubbles because they say that it makes it look more handmade than the sort of perfect in the shop ones. I actually went back to the UK, and when I got back I did think I'd made a colossal mistake, because in the 3 years I was away, people have forgotten about me, people have moved on, and it was a real struggle to get a job, and I actually came here to this studio to work for the two previous owners, and then really struggled to get back into the markets again, because a lot of people had retired and people had moved on, and I actually then started doing trade shows and got back into the galleries again, and then worked here, but doing glass blowing at the weekends and doing shows. And my parents died and left me enough money to say goodbye to that job and to just be, do the glass blowing full time. Obviously renting studios or people, and generally it was 1 day a week, but I could do a lot more shows and get much more exposure, and then was getting more galleries. And that's about it really. It sort of carried on like that. So since 2015 I've just been Thomas Petit Glass and not working for anyone else, which is quite nice. People often say, do you know what you're doing when you start off, when you're making it, or do you just randomly make things? I say, no, I know exactly what I'm making. Obviously every single piece is individual, completely unique. So yes, I can make a range, and I'm like today, for instance, I'm working my way through a list of pieces for a range, and I know there'll all be a colour with the various bands of colour in it, but every single one will be different. But when you put them together, you can see that they all are part of the same colour range. They won't be the same shape exactly, but you know, if you all say have them on a mantelpiece and there's one at each end, they'll kind of look similar. But if you have them next to each other, you'll spot instantly that they're not identical. But then people who buy this kind of glass aren't interested in mass-produced, mold-blown, everything looks identical. They want things that look different, so that if they go to somebody else's house, if they do have it, it'll be different from theirs.